normal, makes sense, and there's no problem with that. Where we sometimes have a problem is if an individual council member tries to call and give staff direction. Direction is not questions, direction is, hey, I want you to do a study, or I want you to go spend hours and hours researching something, something along those lines. That's not okay. The department heads have standing guidance for me that happens, that they're to be polite, but then refer that issue to me, and then I will try to deal with it. If it's something we've already done, yeah, we'll get it out there. If it's not, I'll bring it to this forum or council and ask for direction from the council.
Adam, I have a question. Question about questions.
Sure.
So any type of inquiry is okay as long as it's not causing staff to spend an inordinate amount of time to gather new data or whatnot.
Right. Yep. And then that goes to the third sub-bullet there, is that, just something that's not a council action, something, for instance, several of you contacted me today about things that were, or department heads about council items that were on tonight's agenda. That's perfectly normal. The third bullet is talking about those things that are not really on the agenda, but you have a query about something, or what have you. We've had, and it was before my time, but we kind of have a 15-minute rule. If it's something that the staff member can answer in we'll spend 15 minutes or less, they're just going to go ahead and answer it. If it's something more than that, then we'll chat and figure out a way to either get that information, or again, I'll come back to the council and say, is this something that you want us to spend a bunch of council or staff time on? Does that answer your question?
It does. So if I have a question on planning things, it's okay to go directly to you as long as I'm not spending too much time with you on that issue or taking too much of your time asking for additional information or whatnot.
Yeah, if you're asking for a clarification on like a policy we have or an application that's coming before you, that's definitely something we can have discussions about, and I can try and answer your questions.
Okay.
Oftentimes through those discussions, you might find information that'd be helpful to maybe then bring back up at the council meeting, so that discussion can then finish or be had at the council level as well, so everyone can be on the same page about that, whatever clarification you're looking for. Otherwise, other scenarios where I often talk to council members might be a constituent or someone comes and asks you questions about a development project, and you might not know, so then you reach out to me and forward me with their information, and then I can go follow up with them.
Okay.
So that's kind of an application-based conversation that we do in our department often, but it might come from a conversation that me and you have.
Okay. And similarly, if it's a finance-related question, I can go directly to finance, not to you with questions.
Yep.
Not direction.
Yep.
Okay.
And the department heads know that even when those happen, then they let me know that interaction has happened. A lot of times, if it's via email, you'll note that if you didn't CC me on the question, they're going to CC me on the answer or response. So
Trying to figure out the best way to do it to not take anyone's time unnecessarily. And get to the right person straight away.
And if you have a question about who the right person is, then obviously you can always come to me and I will try to figure out who that is.
You guys are really good about that. I mean, I called Laura today because I had 2 questions on, one is a land development that hasn't started, and I don't know all the details on the property, and so wanted you to connect with them, and you were really good. And then in between the email I sent, I got another request for another property on Brown that you connected. And again, there's nothing in front of us, but you guys are pretty good. That was maybe a 10-minute conversation.
Yeah, that was a short conversation, but then you provided that contact information for me, so I'll go follow up with them outside of those conversations we had.
And then that kind of goes into the second bullet. Again, these slides are originally built for a new council member coming on, but I'm trying to reuse them, so I'll have to make new slides. But the next one is don't jump to conclusions regarding citizen feedback, but really the gist of that is just like Victoria, your scenario is, you're going to get queries from citizens. Sometimes they are an angry query. If you just want to reach out to us, we'll take the first stab at trying to deal with either whatever the issue is or answering that question. And we're happy to do that. And then the final bullet I have on council staff interactions is, note there's not really things too much communication. So when you start hearing things in the community or you have questions, we'd rather you reach out and ask the question or let us know something's going on, and we try to do the same in our weekly updates and what have you, so that there's no surprises on either side of that as what's going on. The next slide I had was just a kind of a continuation on this council staff interactions. I know I always say this to new council members, but respect goes both ways, obviously, but everyone should also be cognizant there is a power dynamic between elected officials and professional staff that often puts staff at a disadvantage. So just try to remember that we're going to do our best to take care of you and support you, but it works better if we do it in a respectful way. And then the other thing is second bullet on there, we're here to provide professional opinions and advice on things. We're not here to get in the middle of political issues that there may be out there. So we're going to bring you the recommendations with the best knowledge and experience that our staff has on whatever the issue is. And sometimes we are going to bring those recommendations or those issues to you, knowing you're not going to like the proposal or the proposed course of action that we have for you. And it doesn't hurt our feelings when you want to go a different direction. We just ask that understand we're going to give you the best advice we can. We just don't want to be attacked for trying to provide that. So if you don't like the idea, that's fine. Please attack the idea and not the individual. That's the point there. The second sub-bullet there is back to the whole communication thing, like for council meetings. We do appreciate if you reach out ahead of time before like a council meeting or something and ask a question, or at least give us a heads up that we're going to ask a question about something or pull something off the consent agenda or any of those kind of things. It allows us to be better prepared. Nobody likes the game of let's see if we can stump the staff by asking questions on something that we may have done that council action 2 weeks ago, and so it may not be fresh on our mind. So if there's something particular you want to know, please give us a heads up. We'll try to provide that. And then the final bullet is we can't take sides. We do our very best to stay neutral between council members. And again, our direction comes from the council as a whole, not individuals. So we're very careful to try to remain neutral when it comes to any disputes that elected officials may have with one another. Any questions on that? We're kind of shift topics here. The next one. The other subject we had was, or had some questions on, was agenda setting, and how does that work? Again, I'll just real quickly. The city clerk is tasked with preparing a draft agenda for council meetings. That includes work sessions, like we're doing right now. And 90%, I would say, of council actions or even work session actions are staff-driven. And what I mean by that is there is something that is going through a already predetermined or pre-designated process that needs to get through a council decision, whether that be a variance going through, a planning and zoning process, a procurement in parks or public works, or any of those types of things. So that's where most of the things come. So we, as a staff, sit down the week before council meetings and try to put together a draft agenda for the upcoming meeting from each of the department heads providing that. Anna, as our clerk, sends that out to you all on a Wednesday usually, to see if there's any feedback or any things that maybe we're missing that you thought you were going to see. And then we basically spend the rest of, the staff is spending the rest of the week finishing up any council actions, gathering whatever data or bids or final letters from residents for a zoning application or what have you, and getting those in by Thursday at noon. And Thursday afternoon into Friday morning was basically the clerk and I reviewing all of those and trying to put the packet together and get it out to you all on a Friday. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how it happens. There's always, and then when it comes to you, I guess the biggest thing is, when it comes to you, like tonight, when we first start the meeting, the very first thing you do as a council is you approve the agenda. The power to approve an agenda rests with you as a body. It is merely a proposal or a draft when we are presenting it to you. So that's the time when it gets approved, that's when really any of the items that we're going to discuss that should be fleshed out, so that we know that's what we're going to talk about in the meeting, and then we proceed to move through the meeting. The other question was that I get is, well, how does an individual council member get something on the agenda that's not something that's part of those automatic processes? And the answer I would have would be, first you would propose it at a format such as this, at a work session, or maybe during a mayor council report in a regular council meeting. Or you could do it right at the beginning of the meeting and say, I'd like to amend the agenda by adding in a council item 1, 2, 3 to talk about X, Y, Z. If somebody seconds it and the majority throws it onto the agenda, then it's on the agenda. If it's something obviously that's more complicated and you need staff to do work on, then obviously we're going to want to know about that ahead of time so that we can have the couple weeks or whatever it is to prepare whatever data we need to provide or recommendations we need to provide or research or what have you. So that's normally, kind of in the generic way of things, something is proposed and we see a consensus from council members that that's the subject that we want on a future meeting. Depending on its complexity, we may first bring it back to a forum like this as a work session item for just more discussion to make sure that we're heading down the path that was intended when the subject was brought up. And then it will come as a regular agenda item at a following council meeting for an actual decision. Is kind of usually, now sometimes a very simple thing may just go straight to a council meeting, but worst case scenario, idea, work session, council meeting. Is kind of how the norm of things has been flowing like that.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So if something was going to be added, and again, understanding surprises are not ideal, obviously, but if a new agenda item were going to be introduced at the head of the meeting, would that ideally be something that was just more of a discussion point, not something that needed some decision, obviously, because like you're saying, you would need to do research and look into things more in order to.
It might be, particularly if it's something you want staff input or research on. Like I say, you can't do research between 6 p.m. when it's introduced and 6:05 when we start talking about it.
Yeah.
So yes. Now legally, you can introduce an item anytime during the meeting that you want to. It's just normally best practice to do it at the beginning. That way, everybody, including the public, knows what you're going to be talking about during the meeting. So there's not a surprise that everybody went home halfway through the meeting and all of a sudden a new maybe controversial item popped onto the agenda at the very end.
And so similarly, we put out that draft agenda on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's not an ideal time to add something to the agenda. It would be better to introduce in a work session, something like that.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge as far as adding something that maybe is just an individual council member's initiative, because I may not have confidence at that Wednesday that there's a quorum, or not quorum, a majority of the council that wants to talk about that. Now, sometimes somebody will say, oh, well, we've been talking about having this on the agenda, and we go, oh yeah, we just forgot to put it on there, we add it, and we move on from there. So, things do change, but if it's a totally new thing, no, it's best that we talk about it in the group form, and then we can move it forward. Is that yeah.
That's helpful.
Any other agenda setting questions, issues? All right. Next one. Council meeting procedures. We already touched on the first bullet there. Agendas approved at the beginning of the meeting. And the reason I wanted to throw that on last time is a lot of times we have gotten focused on we're approving the consent agenda, but we're really not. We're approving the agenda, which includes the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So just wanted to make that clear that that's when you're really setting the agenda, and it's not staff that does that. The other point is clarification. The mayor is the presiding officer or presides over the meeting, and per the Minnesota Mayor's Handbook or the League of Minnesota Cities and statute, the mayor really has two functions as the leader of the meeting. One is to facilitate discussion, and the other is to preserve order in the meeting. We do that through the norms and through just running the meeting. I mentioned this before, and I know Soren jumped in, the city attorney. We use, in our code, it refers to Robert's Rules of Order, but again, Robert's Rules of Order, if you were to look at the book, is about yay thick, and it is really aimed at parliamentary procedure. It's what legislatures and things like that use it in its entirety. However, we do use portions of it as a way to help preserve order and facilitate discussion in our meeting. So, things like somebody making a motion, somebody seconding it, and those kind of things. That's kind of we use bits and pieces of Robert's Rules, but it is not by any means a hard, fast standard operating procedure for the city. That makes sense?
Is there an amended version of that, or like the mayor's handbook or something like that?
The mayor's handbook does have, there's some references in the mayor's handbook. There's like an appendix that says here's, I can't remember the exact title, but the commonly used portions of Robert's Rules of Order, and it has some things in there as guides, like if you want to make a motion, normally say I move to blank, and it has some of those kind of things in there, just like an abbreviated version. And I think I sent that to you early on as part of.
That's the best reference for the amended version of Robert's.
Citizen input. Citizen input is managed by the presiding officer, that is the mayor. Public comment is, in our city, we've done an open forum. There's not a requirement to hand in a written request or what have you beforehand. The kind of the norms of how we do public input or public comments is listed on every agenda. We do have a time limit, which has been established at 3 minutes. I don't know, is there any other questions on how public comment works? The other thing, as far as citizen input.
Do we tend to fall in line with what other cities do with regard to public comment? I know I've attended some cities who require that people are asked write down their name, address, outside on a comment card so nobody can come in. Does League of Cities speak to that, or is that a hard, fast rule?
That's not a hard, fast rule. That is a technique or a practice that is used out there. And some bigger cities will do things like that. And I know it's the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, I know we have people go speak at. They have a procedure like that where you have to sign up ahead of time online, go to their website and say, I want to speak during public comments, and then you get recognized that way.
So is the ask then that people are giving their name and city or address in order to preserve that for the record? Is that a requirement or not?
It's a requirement on our agenda as far as the procedure, and it's a fairly common procedure. They say in those other cities where you write it down, they're going to ask you for your name, your address, and then some kind of summary of what is it you want to talk about. And we have tended to be more open and let almost anyone speak. In those other instances, they'll review those, and that's not they'll pick and choose what subjects are appropriate, they feel are appropriate for their forum, and manage it that way. The other thing on citizen input, there's some nuances. Most of our regular council items, public comment is not required. That's completely at the discretion of the presiding officer, which is different than public hearings. When we have a public hearing and there are certain actions and items that require a public hearing, when we're doing public hearings, public input is required. Or it's not, you don't have to make people talk, but allowing public comment is required. And so we have to have a process for that. I know sometimes this city, we've named where almost every council action is more like a public hearing than just a council action item. The requirement is that we talk about these things, the council talks about these things and makes decisions in a public forum. That doesn't necessarily mean that the general public has the right or ability to provide verbal comments for each and every item. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, meeting minutes. we talk about it now, we also have an agenda item on the regular meeting to talk about it. So, meeting minutes are taken for every council meeting. Meeting minutes are also provided for park commission, regular park commission meetings, and regular planning commission meetings. We also do many meeting minutes for these work sessions. The council meetings, regular planning commission meetings, and regular parks commission meetings are all done by a contractor, a vendor who does that for us. Takes those minutes normally from our recordings or from our audio feed, provides those to the city clerk, who reviews them, and then we bring you those draft minutes to the next council meeting for approval. Again, I would say, we are not at a staff level, the city clerk's not sitting down and re-listening to the entire council meeting and looking to see, do we have every word captured? Because that's not the intent of minutes. The intent of minutes is to provide a summary of the official proceeding that was held. I included on the slide here a number of things that are required on minutes. There's also, I think I sent in the packet, a list of recommended things that the state auditor? Yeah, state auditor recommends. And so, in general, again, minutes are supposed to be a summary. They have to capture who was there as far as the public officials, who made a motion, who seconded a motion, and what the roll call or what the vote was on any of the actions that were provided. There's some requirements that more details for some of our zoning applications. A lot of those details are actually inside of the resolution that is being debated and then approved. You'll see, findings of facts and all those more detailed things in there.
So I'm assuming you're gonna go over this thing verbatim since it's in the council agenda tonight.
Yeah, I just didn't, if there's any discussion or questions about the way we're going.
Have a discussion, talk about it, one of these right to the council. There's no reason to do it twice.
Sure. And that was me. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Council.
Okay, folks, I'm going to switch it out and do another video for the council meeting. So I'm going to shut this down and put it back up in half an hour. Turbine guy? Hello? Turbine guy?
What in the background?